everybody thinks they're going to get one of the better starting pitchers out there, and there's really not that many out there. I mean, you can name a couple on one hand, but for you, what do you think about that dynamic and how everybody thinks there's going to be a dominant starter out there to pick up come trade deadline?
Well, Todd, first of all, you got to remove Ohtani from this conversation. One, I don't think he's going to be out there, and two, if he is out there, he is in a separate category, a category all his own. When it comes to the rest, we always know that starting pitching is in demand at the deadline. But this year we're seeing a ton of injuries, and that's going to affect things for sure. We're also seeing tight races in both central divisions, not because the divisions are so strong, but because they're so weak. So teams that you would think would sell, certainly, are not necessarily going to jump to sell when they might still have a chance in that division. And I'm thinking specifically of the White Sox. About, I don't know, a month ago, I wrote, and some other people wrote too, this team's an obvious seller. There's Lynn, there's Giolito, there's possibly Cease if they want to give up that control. There are a lot of pieces there. Tim Anderson would be another piece separate from those guys. And yes, that's all true. But the White Sox have played a little bit better. Not great. And it's not like they're knocking down the door of division title here. But if you're Jerry Reinsdorf and you're old, I don't know that you're going to want to give up on the season so easily. And then there's Milwaukee. At the start of the year, and even up until now, people think, man, yeah, they're good. They're always good. But Corbin Burns, it's been a real issue for them. They've had fights with him in arbitration. He's going to go. I don't know that he's going to go because last year, you guys remember what happened once they traded Josh Hader and the disruption that caused in their clubhouse. And here they are in first place again. They've got other starting pitchers who are injured. I don't see them necessarily trading Corbin Burns unless things change. So you have all of these situations developing. Then you have a team like the Dodgers that needs starting pitching. A team like the Mets that probably will need starting pitching. All of these contenders. And I just don't believe that the supply is going to be there. That could cause some teams to get opportunistic. And of course, over the next 2 months, things could change a lot too. So I want to qualify everything I'm saying with that understanding that things do change, everything changes. But I don't expect the injuries to change. I expect pitchers to keep getting hurt. And I don't say that happily, of course, but that is going to affect things pretty significantly.
What about Stroman? You wrote about him the other day. He wants to stay in Chicago. The problem is he's pitching so damn well. And the Cubs, in my mind, I know they're not far out, but probably not a playoff team. It's going to be hard for them to look around and say we might have the best or one of the best trade assets at the deadline, and we can have a massive haul because everyone wants starting pitching, playing to your point here.
Yes, and I just talked about Burns, so I don't expect him to be available. I don't expect Ohtani to be available. Eduardo Rodriguez, who was thought to be a guy for the trade market, is now injured. So here's Stroman, top 10 ERA in the game, pitching extremely well, pitching for a team that has been disappointing. Obviously, with an opt-out at the end of this year, he is going to be someone that the Cubs are going to have to listen to unless things turn around. And even if they do, they might have to take advantage of the market. And maybe you get a young starter in return. For a rental, probably not. But you never know, given the demand that is going to be out there. So Stroman told me that, yes, he wants to stay. He loves Chicago. But he's a veteran. He's been traded before at the deadline, if you remember, from Toronto to the Mets. And he is open-minded. He understands that if it's not going to be Chicago, it'll be somewhere else. Then he'll hit the open market, assuming he stays healthy and everything's good. And that will be that. Now, it's interesting about a pitcher like this who has the opt-out clause. Because when you acquire him and you give up whatever you give up for him, the risk is he does get hurt in August or September, and then he doesn't opt out, and you've got the contract coming. Now, maybe if it's a minor injury, not that big a deal, no big deal. But if, let's say, he blows out significantly, and I'm not saying this will happen, I'm just giving you the hypothetical, then you're stuck with the contract. So there is a lot in play, a lot of variables with Stroman, but at the same time, Scott, I'm with you. If they don't improve significantly over the next 2 months, he's gone.
The intriguing name to me is Shane Bieber. Who gets a bigger haul? The Guardians for Bieber or Stroh from the Cubs, and who do you think has a better chance of going?
Bieber would bring a bigger haul, additional control. And the Guardians are really interesting because they're a team that could look to be opportunistic in the way that I mentioned before. They've got Bieber, of course, but they also have McKenzie and Savali coming back off the injured list. They've got young pitchers like Bibby who have come on and performed really well so far. So you could argue that even if they trade Bieber, they'd have enough depth. Quantrill's still there. They can piece it together. Logan Allen has looked really good. At the same time, when you trade starting pitching, you're trading off of your depth and you're risking injury to others, and then that depth just going away. So the Guardians are playing a little bit better maybe in the last week. They haven't hit, obviously. So, yes, I think Bieber could be a guy, but it's tough. Eric, I'm curious what you think. You're on a team. You're within a couple of games of first place, as the Guardians are, and then you trade your ace. That might be tough for the clubhouse.
100%. You saw it in Milwaukee last year with Hader, and it was 100% a dump. I'm not saying they did, like they got rid of Lamet, I think the next day or whenever he came off the layout.
I mean, they got a good haul back.
They got a good haul.
Because it turned into William
But
Contreras.
it was a money dump. It turned into William Contreras afterwards, and you spend the whole season pushing to win. And no matter what you think, even the A's players in a season where they don't win, the players are pushing to win. And when front office trades away your back end guy with Hader, or the Guardians, if you trade Bieber, which I get it, they're going to get a lot for it, and most likely they're not going to keep a $200 million pitcher. You're like, wait a minute, you feel like you're kind of alone out there on your own island as a player, and I think it's a bad look. But as an organization, the players in 6 years, every single one of these players is going to be off the Guardians roster, and you're going to have what you have. So you got to make those decisions. I understand that.
You're also asking guys to step into roles that they're not familiar with. Now, Bieber is not necessarily a top 10 in the game pitcher, a pure ace, but he is their number one, and he is a guy that I'm sure the younger pitchers look to. I know that they look to because of what he has done in the game and who he is and his cerebral nature. You take that away, then you're asking everyone to step up a notch, right? It's not so easy. And for a team that is trying to contend, it becomes that much more difficult. So, yes, I can see it. I can see the logic of it. But if the Guardians are in contention, it just becomes, as Eric said, much more difficult to do.
I saw you saying, "Oh, is he an ace?"
Well, yeah, we had the discussion.
Well, he was definitely an ace for me. I don't know if he's an ace or one. Not anymore. I mean,
one. Even when he won the Cy Young, he needed to put a couple more similar, maybe not Cy Young, but similar years together.
And my thing, Vila's not the same as it used to be. Personal numbers this year, I'd rather actually have Stroman right now. So